Evening all, welcome. So usual thing with this, just a reminder, so it's only members that are able to type in the chat, but we're going to start off with a particular topic, which we'll spend however long we spend on it, just so that people watching it non-live afterwards have got something to anchor onto, and then we'll throw it out to general discussions. Because we've had a little bit of a development. I say development, it's not going to go anywhere, with the RMT industrial action. So the Right Honourable Grant Shapps, the Transport Secretary who couldn't be bothered to attend negotiations, you know, and avoid the industrial action in the first place, he's written a bit of a letter to Mick Lynch, and I'm going to go through it. I'm first of all just going to mention that Grant Shapps, who, remember, hasn't attended any of the negotiations. Had he attended the negotiations, he may well have been able to avert industrial action. But what has he been up to in the meantime? He's obviously been terribly busy. What has he actually done? This summer, as far as I can tell, Grant Shapps has put into motion two things. None of these things are necessarily going to happen, but this is what he's been working on. One, a plan to allow unqualified drivers to drive delivery trucks. That won't go wrong. And second, to make cyclists put number plates on their bicycles, something that only happens in North Korea. So, nice one. But anyway, what I'm going to do, I'm going to go through this letter line by line, because there's a few tiny little flaws in it as far as I can see. So this is what he's written to Mick Lynch. Dear Mick, it's very nice. I assume they're on first name terms. That's what it suggests. Not dear Mr. Lynch or anything like that. Never mind. It says, thank you for your letter of 18th of August on the current rail dispute situation. I've not read that letter. I'm sure it's out there somewhere. I mean, it's not. I'm sure there's nothing confidential in it, but I haven't read it, so I can't comment on that. And also for your previous correspondence of 8th of August regarding the Avanti West Coast timetable issue. Whilst you have commented unfavourably on the extent to which government has had to step in to support the sector with funding, citing your claim that government has had to inject £120 million to prop up the railway sector. So this is the idea, and this is not just the railway sector, this is all of the privatised sectors. The amount of public money that has gone into what are private companies to shore up their profits is quite egregious, quite frankly. But anyway, it says, you omitted to mention that the need for this financial support has been caused by prolonged industrial action triggered by your own and other unions. Now, I've only just read this letter, right? So, you know, I haven't done all the research that I would do if I was doing a scheduled video on this. But what I will say is this. The RMT are striking this year. They haven't gone on strike for quite a while beforehand, though. So if what Mr. Shapps is saying is correct, then we would find that the government are only having to inject public money into the railways at times when the RMT and other unions, presumably he means ASLEF as well, which is the union that mostly deals with train drivers. So when the RMT and ASLEF are on strike. Now, as I say, I've only just seen this. I haven't done that research. I'm going to strongly suspect that if I wasted hours of my valuable time to get all the information I need, I am not going to find any correlation between public money being injected into the rail companies and industrial action happening. Then he says, given that households across the UK have stumped up £600 each to support the railway and workers, the equivalent of £160,000 per job. Now, here's where it immediately goes wrong for me. So if I knew nothing about it, if I was saying, hang on a minute, are you saying that the public has had to stump up £160,000 per worker as a result of industrial action? In which case, how has it never made sense just to give them the inflationary pay rise they're asking? Because that is all any union can reasonably ask, by the way. Unions, of course, lobby for workers. They try and get the best pay and conditions they can. Of course, sky's the limit. But in terms of industrial action, there's no justification for going on strike because you want to turn down an at inflation pay offer. So they haven't got an at inflation pay offer. That's where the issue is. So it wouldn't have cost anywhere near £160,000 per worker to have paid them at the rate of inflation, would it? Each year? Nowhere near. So immediately that sounds a bit suspect. If I was reading that and knew nothing else about it, I would look at that and say the government's very wasteful. Why didn't it just facilitate these pay increases? Right? I'll read a couple of comments before I carry on. Well, slightly related on the bike thing. Why one would explain need to attach the plates to a bike sounds totally pointless and wasteful. Here's the thing. In isolation, I would have no idea. I can understand, just like you get some car drivers that are bell ends, you get cyclists that are bell ends as well, right? So the idea, if someone catches some unsafe cycling on a dash cam and it's got a license plate there, you can sort of say, well, you know, help police track it down. Although it's a bit tricky because all it helps you do is, anyway. I'm quite happy to believe that in theory something like that could be sensible. But what makes me think it's not at all sensible is that if it's not a revolutionary idea, this idea of license plates on bicycles exists somewhere in the world, North Korea, North Korea. So it's not a new idea. I can understand if it's a new idea, no one else is doing it, but it's not a new idea. And given that it's not a new idea, isn't it odd that no advanced economy or even halfway advanced economy in the world has adopted the same move? That to me tells me no. They're just making cyclists the latest target of their sort of silly culture wars, aren't they? But anyway, which name did he sign at the bottom? It does actually say Grant Shapps. So yeah. I'm a bit of an expert reading bad handwriting. But anyway, so Mr. Shapps, did no public money get into those electric companies a few years ago? Am I dreaming? I think right. I mean, it's just at this point the whole concept is an absolute nonsense. But I'll carry on anyway. It says people feel that this ongoing unnecessary strike action is a kick in the teeth to workers who cannot get to their own jobs now. That's also untrue, because polling suggests that in fact, because people may remember when this RMT action was mooted quite a while ago now, I was doing these streams and I said, be very interesting to see if they get the PR right here, because they need the public on board. It's one of these things, if you can keep pushing ahead with it, the public generally will start to look at the government for solutions. But in the interim, how is it going to go down public? Seems to go down all right in public. You know, as far as can be told from polling, the public are largely in support of the action. More to the point, public opinion is it's increased. Public support for the action has increased, which is encouraging. Now, as I always say with these polls, from a political point of view, that doesn't tell me anything at all about those crucial target voters, just the general population. The general population don't decide things in elections. It's like a few 100,000. But anyway, Phil, am I suggesting that Grunt Shapps might be telling a few porkies? Where would he get the idea that lying is a good thing to do in politics? Well, where indeed? But there you go. What are my thoughts on To Gove's interjection into the leadership contest? He hasn't really had an interjection. All he's doing is basically saying that he's backing Rishi Sunak and he'd refuse to serve in a Liz Truss government. I mean, you know, can do what he wants. He knows he's the ablest member of the Conservative Party. He knows he is the most competent minister that party has had in many years. And he knows it's going to be a loss to them on the competency stakes if Liz Truss doesn't get him into cabinet. He's fine with it. He's totally fine. Anyway, we'll carry on because the biggest porcupine of all is to come in paragraph 3. But anyway, I'll carry on with where I was up to. It says, whilst the rise of home working has limited your ability to bring the country to a standstill. Oh, he's tempting him on the old general strike there. Not that Mick Lynch can authorise a general strike, but he can certainly keep nudging the TUC and saying, you know, if you go for a general strike, I'll join you. I'll be in on that. That to me sounds like a bit of a dig. You know, a bit of a prod. He's poking the sleeping bear there. Consider the hospital porter, cleaner and everyone else who needs to physically be at their place of work. Your action is often harming the least well paid the most. The least well paid the most. Well, the least well paid, if they're having to get to work by train, I don't even know how they're managing to live. But anyway, never mind that. Right, here's the big one. It says here, Network Rail have tabled a fair legitimate pay offer. Now, before we get onto that, what would be fair and legitimate, right? Fair would be not a paid drop. So at inflation, right? Legitimate is whatever the workers will accept. I mean, there's no bones about that. When it comes to industrial action over pay, legitimate is whatever the union members will accept. Really that simple. But also, look at what he's saying here. 8% over 2 years. Now, in his tweet, which I haven't got up here, but in his tweet, he says it's an 8% pay rise offer. Now, first of all, 8% pay rise is still below inflation, because inflation right now is just over 10%, and it's forecast to go over 13% before the end of the year. So it's still a big drop, but it's not 8, because as soon as I saw his tweet, I said, you lying bastard, it's not 8%, it's 8%. And it says in his letter over 2 years. Now, I will take his word at that. I thought it was over 3 years. But even over 2 years, that means it's a 4% pay rise. 4% when inflation is already at 10%, right? Because don't imagine inflation's at 0 next year. It's 4% this year, 4% next year. Inflation's going to be high next year. You would hope inflation's not going to be as high next year as it is this year. But if this year inflation's at 13% and next year it's at, say, what, 6 or 7%, then that's a 12% pay cut. Just based on this year. Never mind the fact that these workers, for I don't know, these workers may well have been having below inflation pay rises for the past decade or so. Anyway, let's catch up with some more comments before I go on again. Personally, I haven't heard anyone questioning support for Ukraine in spite of effect on fuel prices, but the news publicises many people angry about the rail strike inconveniencing them. The thing is, as far as I can tell from polling, the public aren't angry about the strikes. The media make out that they are, and some will be. And anyone can get frustrated if they're inconvenienced. I get frustrated if I'm inconvenienced. Although, in my current life, the most inconvenient thing that can happen to me is I lose internet. Oh, that's terrible. But, you know, so people obviously will get frustrated, but ultimately those people are also, I mean, Grant Shapps mentions people like hospital porters. Well, hospital porters aren't paid any better than railway porters, are they? It's railway porters on strike here. And, you know, there'll be some solidarity there. They'll be planning their own strikes very soon, I would imagine. You say it's really worrying if Gove is the best on offer. From a competency point of view, Michael, do you know what? Michael Gove is a very competent minister. He's not someone you want in government, but that's a moral issue. But in terms of his ability, make no mistake, Michael Gove knows how to deliver. It's just that what he delivers is not in our interests. The government don't help themselves by conflating driver salaries with RMT members' salaries and failed miserably. Well, they didn't. I don't know whether they did fail miserably on that one, in all honesty. A lot of the people who will know the lie or see the lie, I mean, let's be honest, the sort of people who are going to listen to Mick Lynch are the sort of the ones who was on his side in the first place. There's an awful lot of polarisation in politics these days. I honestly do not know where those sort of core voters, if we call it that, those target voters are on the issue. All I know is that from polling, public support has not waned for the strikes. If anything, it's gone up a bit. Poor old Phil, when BT workers walk out and have got no internet. Well, at the end of the day, you know, it is what it is. I mean, at the end of the day, if they walk out and there's a national no internet, then no, there's not that. I mean, okay, there's people in other countries, but there's no one to watch it anyway, is there? So it doesn't really matter. You know, if the same thing that stops me uploading them stops other people watching them, what does it matter? In fact, I had a nightmare this evening. The video that was supposed to come out at 5 p.m. and I did schedule it. I have in the August been a terrible month, about cock up after cock up. I have in the past had it scheduled for the following day by mistake, because that's the default position. I usually remember to change it. But it just didn't. It didn't go up. And worse thing, like at the point at which I realised it was 6:30 and it hadn't gone out, and I thought, right, I'll just leave it because the bloody stream's coming out in half an hour. Worst case scenario, it was just a button that I didn't even think I had to press. I've never had to press it before. And I pressed it and it went live. So it's like worst of both worlds. It's now live really late in the evening. But August is a terrible month anyway. I'm hoping it's everyone's on holiday. But anyway, back to more important matters. September's going to be fireworks, Truss playing on nerfing strike action. Yeah. I mean, she's not going to be able to do it very quickly. It's not even certain she's going to do it at all. Something like this sounds to me like it's the sort of thing where she wants to keep shaking her fist and threatening things. Do you know, I mean, how long has the government been threatening over the Northern Ireland Protocol? How long have they been doing that? And they keep changing their threats as well. And I'm not ruling anything out, because Liz Truss, I have no doubt, like Boris Johnson, will do absolutely anything to maintain her grip on power. And her grip on power is much shakier than Boris Johnson's was. To maintain her grip on power as long as it doesn't land her in prison. I mean, that was the bar for Boris Johnson. That was his boundary. That's the point at which he would stop if he might go to prison. And I think the same will be true of Liz Truss. But at the same time, the legislation will not be straightforward. It will not be a quick thing to do. If she tries to do it, I mean, like I said in a video quite recently, here's the thing. If you remove workers' rights to strike, what happens? Do they just take it? No, they don't. You end up with more. If you don't let them legally protest, if you don't let people legally protest, they will illegally protest. And I'm hesitant to say it, but I'm fairly sure the government, the Tories, will understand that. But anyway, YouGov now putting Labour 15 points ahead. Is it? No, it's not that much. But they have gone back ahead, I noticed. But I think the voting intention at the moment is probably very... Oh my God, you're right. Christ, when did that... Oh, I hadn't seen that. Oh my goodness. All right, I'll post it in the thing in case people want to see it. Because that... See, something funny happened. Was it a week or two ago? I can't remember when it was now. It was a week or two ago. I mentioned it in a video. And I said there was a really weird... Like, there's lots of polling companies, right? The two I rate are Ipsos Mori and YouGov. They both have very different methodologies, but both... And I understand how people don't quite get it with polling companies. At the end of the day, polling is quite an advanced mathematical skill. If you've done A-level maths, you will be able to appreciate some of it. If you've done degree-level maths, you will be able to appreciate it. If you haven't even done up to A-level maths, you won't understand it unless you've made a hobby of it, right? It's not intuitive. But the methodology of Ipsos Mori and YouGov is fairly good. They do make the odd mistake, but it's fairly robust. And the proof of the pudding is in the eating, as they say. When it comes to the results of polls, local elections, general elections, things like that, it's Ipsos Mori and YouGov that tend to be backed up by the actual results. But we had a weird situation a week or two ago. Ipsos Mori had a large gap between Labour and the Conservatives. YouGov, Conservatives had pretty much caught up. And it was clear it was down to the very fickle, not really sure voters who one day will say Labour and the other day will say Conservatives, right? But it was very odd that both of them at the same time had this. But now they're basically more in agreement. So it's a bit funny for that. Obviously, it'll bob up and down a lot until the public have sort of got a handle on Liz Truss. I would expect it to be fairly chaotic. But anyway. You don't know how I deal with my first world woes. Yeah. I absolutely appreciate they are first world woes. I always do. Is it? Something funny's going on. Is it raining? But anyway, right. Media on the morning shows always start and continue with the why is it acceptable to inconvenience communities line. Oh yeah, the media will absolutely be pushing it all day and all along. The media, most of the mainstream media exists not to reflect public opinion, not to report on the news. It exists to mould public opinion. That has to be understood. The mainstream media, particularly the newspaper media, but remember even the television media, what do? They spend a lot of time going over the headlines. What's the big stories in the newspapers, which they shouldn't be doing. If people want to read a newspaper, leave them to it. You shouldn't actually be advertising them on, other media. But anyway, I only do it to attack them. I don't think I've ever presented a headline that I haven't attacked. I think a lot of people will continue to support the unions as for the first time in their working lives they see themselves as vulnerable. They can relate to what the RMT is seeking to do. Yeah, and bear in mind, the reason why we keep talking about the RMT is, first of all, they were the first off the starting blocks, but second of all, Mick Lynch has done very well in interviews. He has acquitted himself quite well on this issue. There are two other issues for which I would roundly criticise him, but on this issue, he's been able to stand his ground, basically. Been a few times when a video has hit my account half an hour late. I guessed it was YouTube's delay. Yeah, there's been I think 3 times this month where something has gone up with it. Very bizarre, but generally speaking, they're scheduled to come out at 12 noon my time and 5 p.m. But anyway, right, just to ask my question. Oh, no, I've missed another one, have I? What do I think Rishi Sunak would do about the cost of living crisis if he was Prime Minister? At this point, I honestly have no idea. Because what he's saying right now, I'm utterly convinced is born of one of two things. I don't know which it is. I don't think they're policies he is committing himself to. I think some of it is desperation because he knows he's losing this contest badly, but he's losing it so badly now that it may even be that he accepts he's lost it. And what he's actually trying to do is to weaken Liz Truss's position by outbidding her. So what Rishi Sunak, if some miracle, I don't want to use the word miracle for something awful, but although I think Rishi Sunak would ironically be not as bad for the country as Liz Truss, if something were to happen and Rishi Sunak somehow did become Prime Minister next month, what would he do about the cost of living crisis? Well, he has now committed himself to a few things, like temporarily removing VAT on energy, which can be part of the solution, but that's in itself is not enough. But I honestly don't. What I do know is he'd try and do as little as possible. Rishi Sunak's own honest economic theory is the government spends as little as possible. So he will do what he can to spend as little as possible. He'll do what he can to make out that he's helping whilst fiddling. Like, look what he did with the windfall tax. He was eventually dragged towards, implementing a windfall tax. And it all sounded really too good to be true when he announced it. But then in the details were a load of tax breaks So it was like raising £15 billion with this windfall tax, but giving the oil and gas companies £10 billion in tax breaks, extra tax breaks, over and above the ones they already have. So it, you know, it's like it was taking with one and giving with the other. Our money. But anyway, Boris Johnson's grip on power so shaky that he lost it. Well, at the end, of course, but I mean, up until that point, it was strong. And also, what lost Boris Johnson that grip on power was the fact that he shat the bed with Partygate. Ultimately, he had no discretion. There was no discretion there. He wasn't like, there was a time when MPs would say, oh, Boris Johnson's got his finger on the pulse of public opinion. He never did. It used to drive me mad. He never did. Absolutely never did. You know, he didn't care either. It's not that he didn't have the ability. He just didn't care about having the ability. So it's, do you know what? I've actually completely stopped talking about this one. So we'll get rid of that and put that one back. I quite like that one. So yeah, so if Boris Johnson had had a bit more discretion, just a bit more discretion, a bit more nous, he'd still be Prime Minister very solidly right now. I'm not saying that the Tories would be ahead in the polls, but he would be in control of the party at least. They wouldn't be trying to get rid of him. But Liz Truss, she will, not only has she got to reverse this polling, which is going to be tricky because she's straight into it. She has got almost no honeymoon period. She's got like a few weeks. I will give her till the end of October. If she hasn't come up with some fiddle by the end of October, she's in trouble. But also, there's factions within the Conservative Party, and although those factions existed under Boris Johnson, they also sort of backed him, even if they didn't always agree with him, because he was their meal ticket. Liz Truss cannot demonstrate an ability to win the election. She hasn't got that. But anyway, good move for Gove to back Sunak, given it's almost certain that Truss will win when things inevitably go tits up. He can say he backs the other guy. Well, there is that. There is also the fact, I mean, I'll be honest, for the last year or two, Michael Gove's been fairly quiet anyway. You know, he's been dodging the limelight. There was a while when I just thought he was keeping his powder dry to have another tilt at the leadership himself. That's clearly not been the case. Do you know what? I think he's sort of in semi-retirement mode. You know, I think he's just on the roller coaster, you know, the down to the finish. I mean, someone showed a photo last week of him stuck with them with this 30-hour delay at the airport, and people going, your Brexit brought us this, you know, taking the piss out of him because he was stuck in the result of his own Brexit. And it's like, be fair, looking at the photos, he didn't seem to mind. In fact, there was a photo of an old lady remonstrating with him about Brexit, and the look on his face was just perplexed. He didn't seem to care. He wasn't hot and bothered. He was just, what's going on? And he was probably as high as a kite. But I don't think Gove cares. I think he's just happy now to just potter around. He'll be happy enough on the back benches for a bit. He may even be thinking about retiring. But I've seen no evidence that Michael Gove's really that involved at the moment in anything. Anyway. Oh, there's a comment here maybe relating to what I said about the strike breaking. Surely an illegal strike before a riot, though. Not necessarily. I think, you know, when it comes to strike action, when it's or any protest, when it's there are people who won't unlawfully protest. And there are some who will. But ultimately, as I say, if you don't give people a legal and safe outlet to protest, then it'll build up. And what you'll get will isn't what anyone wants. Do I see Johnson slithering back into PM role in time after Truss, quote, hits the ground? Seems to have a lot of support still amongst Conservative membership. So we're told, yes, so we are told, and we've no reason to disbelieve it. Here's the thing, though. There's a lot of support amongst the membership. There are three problems, as I see it, to Boris Johnson doing this. First of all, He's still got to get past the Privileges Committee investigation. The Daily Mail is really trying a full-on character assassination of those committee members, and there's massive pressure on Tory MPs to try and derail the process at some point. But that investigation's still going to go ahead, and it's still going to turn up unless Liz Truss actually does stop it. But to stop it, she'd have to get Tory MPs to vote to stop it. It's very likely to turn up much more damaging information, right? So even if he ultimately doesn't face the punishment, his name, whatever the public think about him now, because the Tory membership might support him, but the public don't, that's going to be even worse. Their opinion of him is going to sink even lower if anything were possible. Another problem is that Tory MPs got rid of him because they knew he was going to cost them the next election. So if Liz Truss crashes and burns, let us say that they were minded to change leader again, and I'll come on to that because that's the third problem. Are they going to let Boris Johnson come back in when Boris Johnson is also guaranteed to lose them the election? Maybe by even a bigger margin than Liz Truss. I don't think so. And then the third problem is that issue of changing leader again. I mean, the DUP changed leaders 3 times in a year, but they were in some sort of political turmoil. The Conservatives aren't. They're just going to lose the next election. That's the current position. That's not serious turmoil. You know, they've got a large majority. They've got control of Parliament. It's chaotic. If they if they're playing musical chairs with the Prime Minister, the public are going to be absolutely apoplectic. It's going to be insane. Insane. So no, I just think it would be insane for Tory. It doesn't matter that Conservative members want him back in maybe and might still want him back in a year's time. It makes no difference. Tory MPs would be insane because the public don't. All about the question, not maths, but instead I did anthropology at university, so I learnt about that was all about the open question methodology. Am I missing something else again? I'm not sure of that. Sometimes I'll get the odd comment because there's a delay. I don't necessarily know what it's related to. I've always maintained my uni membership despite now being unable to work because of my health. Well, funny one for me actually. I was in the same situation. So I'm not a teacher anymore and there is no union for what I do. So I retained my teacher membership. I did note that it's the NEU. I had an email from them recently saying, oh, sorry to hear that you've wanted to cancel your membership. It's now cancelled. And I'm thinking, I actually will email them back. But I was thinking to myself, I haven't cancelled anything. What are you on about? What? But anyway, was there a 5 p.m. video today? Yes. Yes, it came out at 6:30 because reasons. You know, I think there's been 3 times when something's gone wrong with the scheduling of a video this month, and things that have never happened before. And this was another one. Has there been an increase in uni membership? I don't know, in all honesty. I can believe that the conditions would sort of exist for it. I can also believe that if people start to hear that, because bear in mind, you'll not really read much about it in the mainstream media, but there have been some fairly big wins for unions in terms of individual groups of people getting decent ones, but there you go. Oh, you had to resubscribe to the channel yesterday. YouTube unsubscribed me. Yeah, over quite a number of period of years, I noticed that there have been issues with things like that. I know other YouTubers have sometimes complained things like that. I really don't know what does it. Will Liz Truss have a Theresa May style brain fart and put Boris in the cabinet? No. Well, they asked the question, didn't? And first of all, he wouldn't accept it because he wants to distance himself from the mess, you see, so that he can take over again. You know, I'm not saying he wants to carp from the sidelines. His supporters will do that. He'll keep his hands clean, I think. But he doesn't want to be in the cabinet. But also, there was a TV debate where this was when it was still down to 5 candidates, and it was put to them, which of you would offer Boris Johnson a role in cabinet? None of them put their hands up, including Liz Truss. Despite what the thing is, her vocal and public support for Boris Johnson is purely for the Tory party members, not the public. She knows it's not doing herself any favours in the public. Could Truss call an October election after a poll boost? I don't think she's going to get a poll boost big enough. But yes, of course she could. She'd need MPs to vote for it. She'd need a majority of MPs to vote for it. That wouldn't be a problem because Labour would vote for it. The Liberal Democrats would vote for it. I reckon the SNP would vote for it. There'd be a few other opposition MPs that would vote for it as well. So it wouldn't actually take that many Tory MPs to vote for it. And she'd have enough supporters who probably felt that their own seat's safe to back it. So even if it caused a major rebellion in the party, yeah, she could get a general election every time she wants. What I don't think she'll get is the poll boost. I think she'll get a poll boost. I still think I'd be very... Put it this way, if she doesn't get a poll boost in September, she's knackered. She is knackered. If she starts off behind, like I can believe that in the first couple of weeks, she'll be promising all sorts of brilliant things, right? Lots of doing Boris Johnson, lots of hope, lots of optimism, all that. And because she hasn't had time to deliver, the public will give her the benefit of the doubt. I can see a poll boost. What I can't see is one that's big enough to risk a general election, because bear in mind, a general election campaign is what, 6 or 7 weeks? And if she tries to trigger it in October, that means it's a December election. And all the crises that will be going on, and Labour offering up all the solutions, and the Tories not offering up anything, it's far too risky for them. Far too risky. They're not going to do it. But anyway. Was unsubscribing from channel a problem collecting subscription funds? I wouldn't have thought so, in all honesty. But I don't know. What's Labour's view on nuclear power? We have an election coming up in Sweden soon, and the left here seem to irrationally be opposed to nuclear power. It's frustrating. Well, you say irrationally opposed to nuclear power. It is very messy and very dirty. Renewable energy is far more desirable. Now, in terms of the current Labour Party's stated position on nuclear, it's not ideologically opposed, but just like the last Labour government, it would prefer we used renewables. And if we'd have carried on building up our renewable capacity, it would 2023, I think, was going to be if we'd have carried on that trajectory, 2023 was going to be the year when basically our power comes from renewable. You have the odd power station just supplying for when necessary, but by and large getting our power from renewables. So yeah, that is still Labour's position. Now, nuclear is clean in that normally when we use the word clean energy, we mean doesn't produce CO2. All right, doesn't produce CO2, but it still is raises the temperature of a local water supply. There's still very, very unpleasant waste which has to be dealt with and isn't going anywhere for thousands of years. It's not a long-term solution. Unless, of course, we can crack nuclear fusion, in which case, yes, well, go. But in terms of Labour, I don't think the UK Labour Party, it's not keen on nuclear power. It's not its first choice or even second choice. But at the same time, it's not gonna die on a hill against it. They're saying she's going to have to sweat it until the general election or her legitimacy questioned every day. Well, it sort of will be. I mean, the thing is, I don't get into this legitimacy thing. If you're referring to the fact that, you know, she's been elected by Tory party members, not all of whom are even British, I don't get into that. No one elects a prime minister. No one. You know, it's in any country, it's not how a parliamentary democracy works. So I don't get into all that myself either. I am aware that the argument will be that it's a general election. People sort of sometimes, and a lot will, treat it like a presidential election where they have the party leader in mind when they're ticking their box, but it's not actually what they're doing. And if someone goes into a general election pretending it's a completely different type of election, well, more fool them. That's down to them. That is down to them. But that's not what they're actually doing. So no one votes for prime minister. No one votes for any minister when it comes to it. You don't vote for the government in this country. You vote for you vote for an MP. And yes, I vote for the colour of the rosette because I am trying to vote for the government, but I'm also aware that I'm not. I'm aware that if I vote for the candidate that is in the Labour or Cooperative Party, I am aware that if they decide to defect to another party, they're still the MP I selected, and I have no right to demand a by-election or anything. You know, it's one of those things you just have to, you know, tick your box according to what you think best. But yeah, so I'm not getting into that myself. Looking forward to Liz Truss in the papers out clubbing like Santa Marin. Yeah, I don't see. The thing is, although Liz Truss is not the soul of discretion herself, you know, there was that issue with demanding a ridiculous amount of public money to wine and dine people in exclusive Tory donors restaurant rather than just a standard posh restaurant. She will be a lot more discreet than Boris Johnson. You know, she will know what cocked it up for Boris Johnson, and she's not likely to make the same mistakes. But anyway, in 2010, the Labour government left a list of 10 sites for nuclear for which all the preliminary work had been done and basic planning improved. First thing Cameron did was bin it. Yeah, again, there's nothing to suggest that anything would have happened anyway. You know, we didn't. It was one of those situations we sort of knew we were coming to the end of lifetime for some power stations, but they didn't really want to commission. I mean, they had 13 years in power. If they really wanted nuclear power, they'd have gone for some. Yeah, I've seen that. Germany's decided to keep 3 nuclear plants open due to the gas crisis. Yeah. I mean, in reality, they will last a lot longer than the normal shelf life, but you know, there needs to be a you need to have a more long-term plan. I just don't see. I mean, nuclear can be, you can have it for another couple of generations, but I mean, they tend to last about 50 years anyway. You really don't want to be just sticking by that as your long-term plan. You say you can't get constant power from renewables, it's variable. Well, it is and it isn't. It's like statistics. You know, if you throw enough dice, you'll get it all averaging out. You know, you do generate wind power all the time. You know, you do generate some light energy like half the time. And wave tidal energy. I mean, we're an island. There's a lot of scope for renewable. So you actually can get the bulk of it. But like I said, you would still have the odd power station as well, just to make sure that you cover any little gaps. But they would be little gaps. Under the radar, Phil, the Northern Ireland minister said he would think about calling an election in October. There's your distraction. Well, we knew that anyway. It has to happen, doesn't it? I mean, I did notice there has been renewed talk about changing the way it works. I mean, it is an absolute nonsense that Stormont works on the basis that you have to have your largest unionist and Republican party in attendance for it to function. And it's made a complete nonsense by the emergence of the Alliance Party. I mean, imagine if after the next elections, the Alliance Party is the second largest party. It then makes no sense to have Stormont run as it does. The problem is that there isn't enough political will in Northern Ireland to change it. There is amongst the public, I gather, but not amongst enough of the politicians. But also the UK government, it's in their interest for Stormont to be basically a two-legged donkey. But anyway, when Truss becomes PM, who do I think she'll have as Chancellor? Who was it? There's been quite a lot of talk about that today. I think, was it Kwasi Kwarteng? Or was it? What am I thinking? I'm pretty sure there was some talk today about, I'm not sure where I'd find it now. I don't think I made a note of it. I think there was some talk about the people she may assign. And I think it might have had Kemi Badenoch as Home Secretary as well. And Theresa Coffey maybe as Chief Whip. But I think Kwasi Kwarteng was a possibility for Chancellor. Whoever it is, I mean, bear in mind, Liz Truss, just like Boris Johnson, is also going to arrange a cabinet of incompetence. Make no mistake. She may get a few more competent. I don't actually know if Kemi Badenoch is competent or not. In a way, I sort of hope she isn't, because she's horrible. I'd rather, if you've got an evil cabinet minister, I'd actually rather they were someone like Dominic Raab, who can't actually get anything done. Because like we were worried about Dominic Raab, for example, you know, abolishing the Human Rights Act and trying to pull us out the European Court of Human Rights and all the rest of it. There's nothing to suggest he'd have ever managed it. Just because he said he wanted to do it, and just because the political will is there, doesn't mean he can do it, because he's incompetent, you see, as well as lazy. So if we're going to have evil cabinet ministers, I'd rather they were stupid and lazy, because then they might not actually carry out their evil plans. You say your favourite would be Kwarteng. Academically brilliant, but not politically astute. The thing is, though, whoever it is going to have to do what... When you appoint a Chancellor, it has to be... And not every Prime Minister has done this, and it's a big mistake when they don't do it. You need to appoint someone who's on your wavelength as Prime Minister, because they have to... It's impossible for you to deliver your agenda without the Chancellor. The Chancellor controls the purse strings. So Liz Truss will need someone who's totally on her side, or of the same way of thinking. It has to be one of the other, preferably both, but it has to be one of those two. Would Truss go all in for a US trade deal? Don't see how she can't get it. I mean, the US are sort of cool on the idea anyway, but while the Northern Ireland Protocol is under threat, it's really clear. And I cannot say this enough. It doesn't even matter who's in the White House. Like, there's some people keep thinking, oh, the Democrats tend to be more ideologically, aligned with Labour, and the Republicans much more so, particularly with this very right-wing Conservative government. But in reality, it's not a partisan issue in America. Ireland, Northern Ireland peace process is an issue on which Republicans, Democrats, wholly in agreement. There is no camaraderie between the Republicans and the Conservative Party on the issue of Northern Ireland. None at all. So she has zero opportunity to get a US trade deal. And she will know it as well. She's not that stupid. Braverman was suggested as Home Secretary. Okay. I would suggest that Liz Truss is probably better off keeping her as Attorney General. The thing is, the job of Attorney General is supposed to be to make sure the government are brought up to speed with the legal position on various policies. Their job is supposed to be to make sure the government doesn't break the law, which is why it's always a dodgy move when an Attorney General resigns, because it usually means the government are trying to break the law and they're not standing for it. Whereas since Boris Johnson, it has been the job of the Attorney General to work out ways to let the government break the law. And Suella Braverman has been absolutely fine in that role. I'm not sure they have anyone else who would do the same. So it may well be, I can't be certain of that, but it may well be that Liz Truss has to keep Braverman on as Attorney General. Will Mad Nads be part of the cabinet? I don't think so. I don't. She is a supporter of Liz Truss. As far as I know, the rumours were that Boris Johnson plans on sending her to the House of Lords. As far as I know, that's the default position. We'll wait and see. You'd have Pol Pot as Foreign Secretary is less cruel. Well, to be fair, Pol Pot was only cruel to his own people, wasn't he? So, you know. Doesn't Kwarteng own YouGov? I think, did he have shares in it? Nadim Zahawi was one of the co-founders of it. But again, a lot of people, you know, again, ignore anyone trying to suggest that YouGov, because it's owned by some Conservatives or has been in the past or was set up, that they don't have anything to do with the day-to-day running. They just own shares. It's just, I keep saying, it's just like a greengrocer. If you find out your local greengrocer is run by a Tory, do you know what? Their apples are still apples and the bananas are still bananas. Replacing Patel with Braverman doesn't seem like much of a change. Both nasty. Well, as I say, I don't think. I mean, I don't know. I don't know what's going on behind closed doors, but I just think that Liz Truss will struggle to get an attorney. She is planning on breaking the law. It's really that simple. She is planning on breaking the law. She needs an Attorney General who is prepared to turn a blind eye to it. And the thing is, you've got to bear in mind, even an MP who is a lawyer and who might want a career in law after being an MP has to be very careful. I do not think the Criminal Bar Association will look very kindly upon Suella Braverman's role as Attorney General. In fact, I know they haven't. So if she was to lose her seat, for example, I don't know how likely that is, but if she were to lose her seat and will want to practice law again, I'm not sure how easily she'd be able to do that because of what she's done as Attorney General. A lot of MPs are quite worried about the damage to their reputation of clearly backing illegal moves on the part of the government. So I think Braverman is stuck as Attorney, and it's not a bad job. I don't think it's a job she resents, but I think Truss may find that she's the only one she's got who could do it. Who's going to give us the trade deals to make up for the 4% loss in trade from Brexit? No one. It's not possible. US, China, EU, Japan, etc. will give us nothing when we make up with the deficit. We're not. I've worked it out. I've done maths on it before. It's not possible. If we were to get the equivalent of Australia type trade deals with every country on earth, doesn't nearly make up for it. And some of the lows, and that includes the United States and everyone like that. The United States will not give us as a good deal as the Australia deal. Some other countries might. Doesn't matter. There's no capacity. That level of market entry doesn't compensate at all. Braverman's so incompetent that she had to find a Trump law in America to get advice on breaking the Northern Ireland Protocol. Sure, but competence is not part of her brief. Her brief is to tell MPs that what the government is doing is legal and to tell the public as well. Something the other one, even Geoffrey Cox. Now, Geoffrey Cox is hardly a principled man. But when he was Theresa May's Attorney General, she tried to get him to stand up in Parliament and suggest that something she was doing was totally fine. And he didn't do it. He stood up in Parliament and he gave his views, and he was very, grey area about it. But he refused to say what Theresa May wanted him to. So even Geoffrey Cox, who is a vile man, understands the importance of not shitting on his reputation as Attorney General. Will the government say eat Australia meat if you can't afford to eat soon? Well, it won't be that soon because they're making sure the Australia deal, although it's been agreed, doesn't actually come into force properly for many years because they want to be out of the blast zone. Basically, these post-Brexit trade deals are like a ticking time bomb. They want some other government in charge when it all blows up in their face. Bill Cash for Attorney General. I'm not sure he would. I suppose he might. God, that would be something, wouldn't it? Anyway. You say if you found your local greengrocer supported Brexit, it wouldn't be my greengrocer. See, I don't boycott purely on like political beliefs unless they're proper obnoxious about it. Like I won't go into a Wetherspoons because Tim Martin was particularly obnoxious about it. But there's very few companies I would boycott purely for their political views. It would have to be either really far on the scale of unacceptable, or they'd have to be very vocal about it. So really, Wetherspoons is one of the few I would sort of boycott. Michael Fabricant for Home Secretary. Yeah, see, Liz Truss, although she's not going to be a serious Prime Minister any more so than Boris Johnson, she does sort of, I think, want to win the next election. And she's not Dominic Raab. You know, in the past, I've said things like, you know, Liz Truss is above average in terms of intelligence for the cabinet. And people would go, oh no, but she said this, she said that, she's thick as mince. Yeah, she is thick as mince. She was still above average for Boris Johnson's cabinet. She's not that thick. You no longer go to M&S? Oh, I do. Boycotting trains because Mick Lynch liked Brexit. No. I've got to go on a train. I keep forgetting to book my bloody ticket for London. I'm going to I hate trains. Actually, that's not true. I just hate London. But I'll be going there. Dyson, Dyson was a Brexit supporter and he did leave the country. But was he really obnoxious about it? I don't know that he was really obnoxious about it. Like Tim Martin was really like in your face about it. He did his tour of his pubs to push Brexit down people's throats. He went on the media. You know, you couldn't shut him up. Whereas others, just because they favour, I don't like. It's quite divisive. I find it unhealthy to try and judge people because, like, here's the problem as well. Like, let's say someone, a business owner, supported Brexit. Say, oh, I'm going to boycott you. But then let's find that you find that they donate a lot of their profits or personal income to, say, food banks or homeless charities, shelter, say. Then you go, oh, hang on a minute. You know, do you know what I mean? So there's some people that may do a thing that we consider morally like suboptimal, but maybe there's other aspects to the character that are quite nice. So I think, you know, people are people. Sometimes people can do or say things you disagree with, and but other things you may agree with. So I tend to try and give people a chance. If they're really obnoxious about it, if they show themselves to be deeply unpleasant, well, that's a different thing. You boycott Ryanair because of Michael O'Leary. I boycott Ryanair because I have no desire to go onto a plane anywhere. I really don't like travelling. Swedish left wing wants to build high-speed rail. I'm pretty pumped for that. Trains are the best. Well, I mean, the thing is, for me, as I say, it's not really the trains that I mind. It's the going places. So, and the sitting around in a station and trying to work if you've got on the right bloody train, because if you haven't, you're paying for it again. You know, I'll be getting my tickets with a train company, but if I accidentally get on a different train from the same station going to the same place, but it's a different company's train, that ticket's not valid. I can do without that. Admittedly, that's an issue of privatisation, but you know. It was all different when I was a young lad because my dad worked at the railways, so we didn't pay anything. We had so many, you had a family pass, so you could take so many train journeys a year. So you didn't have to pay for train travel. Now you may have to pay twice to take the same bloody train. London's looking to welcome me, Phil. Well, hopefully it will. I'm sure it will be fine. I'm actually not, but you know, it'll be what it be. The way I've looked at it is, I agreed to do it because I thought, look, I'm going to have to get over this monkey. I'm going to have to learn how to go to London. So I'll just get it done and see what happens. But anyway, we're sort of run out of time. We'll try and just get the last couple. Do I think those recently exposed earlier comments made by Truss about the NHS, doctors and those lazy British workers will come back to haunt her by Christmas? I do hope so. I certainly think that Labour have built up a hell of a portfolio of things that Liz Truss has said, past and present. And I think Labour will be bringing them back whenever they can. Was nationalisation of the rail forbidden by EU rules? No, because EU countries have it. We have it. The railway is largely nationalised anyway, and at various times the government have brought bits of it into public ownership. So it's absolutely not. What the EU, I'll go on to this, will be the last thing. The EU rules state, so here's what you can't do with the EU state aid rules. So let's say you've got some private providers of something, doesn't matter what it is. Let's say broadband. Let's say the government wants to, like the last Labour manifesto talked about a state internet company, right? So, but you've got private companies as well. So here's what state aid rules don't let you do. You can set up your nationalised system and it can compete with those private companies. No problem at all. What you can't do is keep funneling public money into it if it's failing, if it can't sustain itself, if it can't operate on a commercial basis. What you can't keep doing is pumping public money into it to keep it afloat when you won't do the same for the private companies. That's all. But here's the way I look at it. You imagine two companies, the state-owned company and a private company. The private company has to do everything the state-owned company does, but it has to make a profit as well. If you cannot make that state-owned company commercially viable, you're an idiot. You're an absolute idiot, because you don't have to make a profit. You just have to deliver the service, right? At cost. At cost. That's all you have to do. If you can't do that, I don't know what you can do. So that's all the EU rules say. That's all they say. You can't keep, if it's running competently, you can't keep pumping public money in to keep it afloat, because that's unfair competition. You have to allow private companies to compete with the nationalised industry, organisation. As long as you're prepared to do that, no problem. No problem at all. But we put public money to trains anyway. Exactly. So it's all a nonsense. But anyway, I don't have to go yet. The dogs are asleep. No, they're not. I can hear them barking. Right. I'm going to have to get going because they do need walkies. We have actually taken to walking them in the morning on weekdays, but not on the weekends. I ain't getting up that early. And it gets too warm later on. So thanks for coming on, everyone. Have a lovely evening. And until next time, I'll see you later.